I recently read a remarkable story about a college student named Bill who came to faith in Christ because of some Christian students in his dorm. They had a Bible study and they invited him to come along, and he did, heard the gospel, received Christ. And as he grew in the Lord, he knew he ought to visit a church somewhere. Well, there happened to be a church directly across the street from his campus. Your typical suburban, middle-class church. He hadn't been raised in church before and didn't necessarily understand the culture, and so he showed up at 11 o'clock dressed in his customary jeans, a t-shirt, and his favorite pair of sandals. He entered the church and began to walk down the center aisle looking for a seat. People were very uncomfortable as they watched Bill walk down the aisle, but nobody said anything as this young man looked for a seat. One pew after another. The church was crowded. It was almost time for the service to begin. He got all the way down to the front of the church auditorium, to the very front pew, and realized there were no seats left. So without any hesitation, he just sat down on the carpet in the middle of the aisle, just like his Christian friends invited him to join them as they met for Bible study in the dorm room. He casually crossed his legs and waited for the service to begin. Well, you can imagine the tension in the air was so thick, it was like smog. You could see it, feel it. People were whispering back and forth, craning their necks to see this strange young man sitting in the middle of the aisle. Then, all of a sudden, one of the elderly deacons began walking from the back of the church down the aisle toward this student. It was a man who was well respected in the church. Church members were whispering back and forth to each other. Well, you can't exactly blame him for scolding this young man. I mean, he is disrupting the worship service. That's not how you dress when you come to church either, and that certainly isn't where you sit. Well, as this impeccable deacon got closer, as he worked down the aisle toward this young man, the church became totally quiet. By the time he reached where young Bill sat, all eyes were watching to see what would happen next. When this deacon reached Bill, the crowd was absolutely stunned because they watched him with some difficulty lower himself to the ground and sit down next to Bill. In fact, he even crossed his legs like this young college student did, and he shared his hymnal with him. Well, that Sunday, this elderly deacon not only worshiped there on the floor next to this new believer, but he actually reminded the congregation what worship was all about. Jesus Christ considers us his representatives on earth, and we're to win the world to him. Well, how do we do that? Do we debate them into the kingdom? Do we scare them in? Do we bribe them? Do we threaten them to join? No. We're to show them Christ's grace and his love. Unbelievers may refuse your beliefs. They may be able to refute your arguments. They may even ignore your message entirely, but they cannot deny your loving spirit toward them. So let me encourage you, be on the lookout for aisle seats. You never know when they'll become the perfect place to serve someone for the glory of Christ.